Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm sure this has been a long BriForum for you. You're heading into the final afternoon of day 2. I have never been to London. As you can tell, I'm an American. So this has been an exciting time for me coming here for the first time over to Europe. And I've spoken in Chicago several times, but never in the UK. And I have to tell you, a really beautiful country over here. Very nice. We're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about deployments and deploying operating systems and how you can automate a lot of the tasks that you do to deploy your operating systems in your environments. The first thing I have to ask is how many people actually are independent consultants or consultants working for resellers? Okay. And are you Microsoft partners? Are you? Okay. All right. Some of the things I'll touch on you'll already be aware of then, but I'll go through some of the stuff. What we're talking about is we're going to talk about mainly about Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows 2008, even a little bit of 2003 mixed in there, and then on to 2012 and Windows, Windows 8, and how you can best look at deploying those operating systems in different environments. As you can tell, I work for a company called Nell Media Consulting, which is me. I'm an independent consultant, and my websites and my Twitter and all that kind of good stuff. And now my clicker's not working. We'll go there. First thing we're going to cover, we'll do the questions. Well, basics of deployment, taking a look back, old school and new solutions, MDT, and I'll explain what the MDT is for those that don't know. The demo, resources, Q&A. I kind of fly through slides because I don't like PowerPoint to begin with. So we're going to have a lot of demo, and it's going to be a lot of live demo, but I have to get through some of these slides so you have a basic understanding of what I'm trying to accomplish here. If you have any questions at all during the presentation, don't hesitate to ask, okay? If we start getting off on a subject and it takes up a little bit of time, I want to try and make sure I have enough time for the demos and everything, so I might ask you to hold off until after and come talk to me after, and I'd be more than happy to help you out. So the first thing I have to ask is questions for you. Who's already automating operating system deployments today? Okay. Should I take it the rest of you are not? Pretty much? Okay, so only about 8, 10 hands raised who's automating deployments. What are you using to automate your deployments? One more time, sorry? WDS, okay. Anybody else using something else besides WDS? System Center? Okay. Pardon me? Okay, Altiris. All right. Can I ask the people that are not, are you still doing manual installs? Is that pretty much it? Okay. Templates and clones? Okay. And anybody else still using the old disk method? Still popping in CDs and running off the original media and all that? Yeah, you're creating an image, Ghost, something like that, PC clone? Okay. I just hope nobody's sitting there going like this, like, you know, the old days. And I would hope not. Why and why not? I've pretty much already covered that. You're both doing virtual and physical. Everybody is pretty much deploying their servers along with their desktops, I would assume, because you know you can do servers and desktops, physical, virtual. If you're doing VDI, even if you're not doing VDI. And covered that. And what is your goal when you want to deploy? If somebody could just, you know, across the room here, if you can just, you know, shout it out and say, what is your goal with trying to get the operating systems out to the platform? Is it, give me an example. I'll give you one right off the bat. It's speed of deployment, okay? A lot of companies have the goal that they want to have a machine start out from here all the way to the end user, and they want it within this time frame. Does anybody else have any different goals than that they're trying to accomplish? Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay, good. Anyone else? Anybody have anything else? App compat? Anybody deal with application compatibility, trying to get that standardized? Okay. We'll go through a couple of scenarios that I have later on, and I'll run through some of the things that I've run into with various different clients. I really wish this worked. It doesn't work. Okay. For those of you that really aren't automating, we have a saying, I don't know if it's a saying in the UK, something called getting on the bus. You really need to get on the bus in order to move ahead, to move forward. This is a very busy slide, but this is basically statistics about how companies that deployed and did not deploy everything back to Windows Vista and XP. If you take a look at it, 72% didn't even look at Vista, which is really a good thing, in my opinion. But that just means that they're slower to adopt. They've actually slowed down their adoption of the new operating systems. Microsoft is now pushing towards a 13-month cycle. Okay, if you look at a 13 to 16-month cycle on operating systems, that's going to keep moving faster and faster and faster. All right, look at Windows 7, and now we're on Windows 8, which will be released here very soon. Users and platforms will make it a necessary skill set. We're talking about VDI. When you're talking about virtual hard drives, okay, VHDs. You're talking about Type 2 hypervisors, which are the client hypervisors, the ones that rest right on the desktop. Things that deal with Zen Client, a couple other Mocha 5, things like that. XA support drops from EA customers in 2013. Brian had this in the Geek Out last night, as a matter of fact. Unless you have a lot of money, you can pay for support. Windows 8 in 2012, which will be released soon. And there's really no reason I can think of that you wouldn't want to make your life easier by automating. I mean, in our job as IT, we really have to try and make our jobs easier, right? That's what we want to do. And if we can automate things, i.e. scripting, software, just processes and procedures that make our lives easier, we should be all for it, I would think. So I'll give you the basics of a deployment. When you're dealing with, I don't need that because that doesn't work. If I give you the basics of a deployment, when you're dealing with an automated deployment, you have to have something, basic set of processes that happen. The first thing that happens is there has to be something called a boot initiator. You've got to have something that initiates the boot. What am I talking about? Pixie? There you go. Okay. WinPE, obviously. Windows PE. Okay. Interaction, the touch. By touch, I mean, do you do a light touch? Okay. Do you do what's called a zero touch? Or do you do what's called a high touch? All right, which is actually a user touch, they call it. All right, there's different kinds of touches. The task sequences, when you're dealing with task sequences, the same thing with like, if you're familiar with task sequences with SCCM, I think, does Altiris use task sequences? I'm not sure. But basically, you're just executing things in a sequence, executing tasks in a sequence. The drivers, specifically hardware. Images, you deal with images, the golden, the master reference, and then logging and monitoring. All of these steps will form the outline of an automated deployment. If you have all of these things, you can have successful automated deployments. So in the Windows deployment layers, you start talking about the install.wim or the custom.wim. Did anybody know when the WIM actually came into the Windows arena? What version of Windows it actually appeared? Anybody guess? Just call it out. Vista, exactly. Vista is when they actually started to make what's called the WIM. Okay? What the WIM is, basically, it is the operating system in an image. Okay? That is the bottom layer. If you have the install.wim, which is a basic one you pull right off the DVD, the deployment media, or you create a custom WIM, which packs in anything that you want, applications, drivers, whatever you want inside of it, okay, that's a custom WIM. From there we go to the drivers themselves, okay? Because if you don't do the custom on the install, you can add your own drivers. And you're going to need them for your hardware platform. Right now, they're, in Utopia, we'd have universal drivers. We wouldn't have to worry about any of this. But when you're dealing with hardware, it's the nature of the beast. You have to deal with drivers. Languages, the MUI packs, okay? I have to say that over in the US, we don't deal a lot with MUI packs. Here, I'm sure you do. You deal with a lot more than we do. I deal with some bigger clients that have international presence that require some of the MUI packs, but my understanding here, I've talked to some people with the UK government yesterday. I was talking to them, and they deal with everything has to be MUI. And to me, that would be kind of a nightmare. But, they have to do that. So then you have your updates. You have the, the layer of updates. It's Windows. You've got to have updates. Then you have your applications, and I separated out Office 21X. 2012 will be out here soon. So the application's right on top of that. And then the actual customizations and registry keys are the last. So you see how you built your hierarchy, okay, of the layers. This is everything that goes inside of a deployment. All that stuff mashed together in a big image. These are the old days. Remember this? Yep, insert floppy 14. It's insert floppy 20. How many people want to go back and do that? I mean, those were the days. I mean, maybe I'm just too old. I don't know, but 20-some years in the business, and I remember having to sit there and, yes, do that. I remember doing DOS on 5 1/4, trying to put DOS 5, it was 4 something, 401 or whatever, before they came out with the 3.5 discs. They had the 5 1/4. Wow, I am old. This is actually a picture that I got off of Google, but it's of a school here in the UK. And this is how they do their deployments. They line up all the machines around a room, and they plug them all in. And they have to plug them all into the network. And then if you look really close, well, you can't see it in this picture. You look really close, they're actually taking an image, putting it in the drive, imaging the machine, pulling it out, going to the next one, putting an image in the drive, pulling it out, and doing that. One by one. Sure, they have that image, but they have to burn like 20 copies. So they line up all the machines, and they can put 20 copies in once, right? But they have to go to each machine and put the DVD in and do that. Those are the old days. So in the old school you're talking about, and I use this picture of this old schoolhouse here because it's kind of fallen down. It's ready to, it's about ready to go. Clones and templates. Believe it or not, clones and templates are really not the best option for mass deploying or even partially deploying operating systems. Did you know, in fact, that Microsoft doesn't support it officially? Doesn't support it. Okay? I don't know if you remember the old NewSID. Has anybody used NewSID? Okay, that's never been supported. That is never. I mean, even though it was like stamped with Mark's name on it, from Systernals and then Microsoft saying, nah, we don't support that. Nope. You use it. You're on your own. So clones and templates, you really have to think ahead. What are give me some of the problems with clones and templates. I think you mentioned you use clones and templates. Give me some of the issues that you run into.
You can't have a standard image because basically some customers are different. Some have different. We can't dictate the updates, for example, and we can't. So a very vanilla build with no updates, and you're really not saving a great deal of time.
Right, and there's two things that happen from that. Number one, in order to add any updates, you actually have to convert that template to an actual machine, turn it on, add the updates, turn it off, do that. Number two is the fact that after you've got that deployed, you've got 30 of them. How are you going to update those? On the fly. Yeah, unless you have a third-party system like SCCM or something, you can deploy packages and all that. That's wonderful. The other thing is, what if you wanted to actually do an upgrade? What if you wanted to actually take a machine that was built on 2003 R2 and upgrade it to 2008 R2? I don't know why you would, but I'm just using an example. You know, so can anybody else think of anything else with clones and templates?
You also hit a limitation on 2008 R2 and the number of times you can rearm. So if you use syscript as a tool, you can only rearm it, is it 3 or 5 times?
Yep. Yep.
So if you hit a limitation there,
Right. Right. Yes.
You can set it back. That's a possibility.
Yes, it is very possible. There are ways to do it with the rearm, to do things like that without a problem at all. But it's a matter of why go through all that work? It really doesn't make sense. You know, there are easier ways to do this, and they're free. Okay, disk imaging. Some people mention they use Ghost, Acronis, things like that. That's basically taking an image just like you would a clone or a template, you know, and multicasting it across the network, or else putting it on a DVD and popping it in a machine, and you've got an exact, you know, copy of the golden or the reference image. File level duplication. Believe it or not, I still have a client that uses this. I have no idea why, but they still do this. And the product is still made, Carbon Copy. I don't think LapLink is made anymore, but Carbon Copy still is. High touch installs. I put an asterisk next to that because I have to have a disclaimer. SCCM, the new version, 2012 of SCCM, the high touch installs for that are really sweet, really nice. So I put an asterisk next to that because of the fact that it is kind of old school to have somebody sitting there and clicking, yes, I want this, I want that. I'll put in this for the product key, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do that, I'll do that, and okay, then it'll deploy. All right? But the new UDI, what they call the UDI with SCCM, is really nice. And you can customize everything about it. You can automate just about everything with it. So it's pretty cool. And then mega scripts. Are you familiar with, here in the UK you do, as a matter of fact, I saw it outside. Kleenex, the tissues. I work for a company, Kimberly-Clark, that makes those in the US. Their installation, 6,000, was it 6,000? Yeah, somewhere around 6,000 servers. And their installation was about, I don't know, maybe 30,000 lines of code, because they were all scripts. This script would call this script, which would call this script, which would call this script, this script, this script, this script. If you wanted to do one thing, like change the drive letter of a CD-ROM from the next one, you want to put it at Z, so it would always be at Z, okay? You would have to go through all those codes to find out when that script is called to change that drive letter. Literally, they had 2 people, that's all they did, was do scripting for operating system deployments. They did not believe in the automated way in terms of, you know, having some organization around what they're doing. They basically just said, oh yeah, we've got these, you know, hundreds of scripts that we just go out and call, and this one guy knows, so go ask him. He'll know where it is in the script. You know, okay, well, is it documented? I mean, can I find it if I look it up? No, he knows where it is. You go ask him. He knows where it is. You know, this is a multinational company. That's 6,000 servers, 65,000 users worldwide. And they're doing this. What's that?
That's important data.
Yeah, yeah. So I've gone through some of these, but I'll step through them. Basically, a lot to do with hardware drivers. App compat, I run into that a lot. Application compatibility, especially when you're dealing with ghost images, even clones and templates. When you have applications that upgrade, and they require certain prerequisites. They no longer support .NET 3.51 SP1 R2 X4. They only support 3.51 XSP4 or whatever. you have to go through and update all those images in order for that application to work. Disk partitions in geometry, that mainly runs in when you're doing ghosts and things like that. Lots of scripts like I was talking about. Active Directory, the SIDs and GUIDs, machines account passwords, time sync, which is big in Active Directory. We talked about that. Updates and service packs, throwing those updates on, and then deployment time. Right now, I mean, you can take a deployment, and I've literally taken a deployment that took 4 hours from start to finish. That was from the request coming to the IT department, and the machine actually being put on the user's desk was 4 hours. The actual deployment of the operating system on the desktop was 22 minutes. 22 minutes, and that was all of their applications, everything. Not updates, not Windows updates, just their applications and the Windows OS. The updates alone take another 45 minutes to an hour to run. And that's just because you've got literally hundreds of them from Microsoft. But the company was so impressed by that because they were like, oh, we've never been able to give a machine to a user within a week. If they request a machine, it takes a week to get it to them. Now they get it to them in a day, basically. And that's what kind of I'm getting at. They go to the old assembly line, and then they put it together with their hands. They move it down, and they put it together. And you really want to get over to the automated, with the robots. Robots, and then the car is pulled off the assembly line like that. So the automated solutions, Altiris, Manage Engine, all these, which some people have mentioned. Hardware vendors actually have their own options, Dell, HP, and IBM. I don't know if anybody's dived into those at all. I've used HP, the Smart Start scripting toolkit, quite a bit when you're dealing with hardware. I'm sorry? Yeah. With the new tools that are available in the auto deployment with the accelerators that I'll be talking about, that isn't really necessary anymore using that deployment. But if you have Insight, what do they call that now? Insight Dynamics or something like that, you're pretty much, you pay enough money for them to do that stuff for you, kind of. The same thing with Dell. I'm not familiar with IBM. I haven't worked with IBM in, it's been so long. It's been a long time. So then we start looking at the MDT solution. Oh, wait a minute. Did I back up? Yeah. Where's my, oh, there it is. My slide didn't work. Where's my slide? I'm sorry. My slide is all messed up here, so I'll try and fix it. There we go. Then we have open source. There is some open source options out there that'll do OS X, Linux, automated deploy. Here in the European Union, do you have a lot of Linux desktops that you deploy? No? A lot of Windows? Cool, okay. Some of those are actually appliances. There are quite a few free ones that you can get out there that'll do package deployments. One is, I've got a couple written down here. One that I've actually looked at, I've never used, is something called Unattended. It's out on SourceForge. It's something that you can actually create an appliance and it'll do all the scripts. Really what it's doing is it's just creating the XML files or the answer files to run the automated, deployment. Obviously, if it's a Mac, it's Darwin, right? So it's Linux. So you're dealing with Linux OS. And that's all done through Kickstart scripts or however, Linux. I think they actually have a library now that's included for Linux. And I can't remember the name of it that does deployments. Can't remember the name of it. What else have I got here? Oh, how many use AutoIt? Have you ever used AutoIt? Oh, it's an awesome tool. You got to check it out. If you do any kind of batch scripting or any kind of scripting in general that you want to automate, I would check out AutoIt because it's like the most widely used, task generating, mechanism there is. And you can do all kinds of things with it. A lot of people will actually do full automated operating system deployments using AutoIt. That's when you start getting into the big scripts. Okay? but AutoIt is the back end for that. And then we have what's called the Solution Accelerators. People that are Microsoft partners, you've heard of these, but Solution Accelerators are created by Microsoft. The reason why they're created by Microsoft is so more people will deploy their operating systems. Duh. What they want to do is have people go from Vista to Windows 7 to Windows 8. What happened in Vista, I was working for a reseller. I was sent out to Redmond for a Vista deployment. This is right after Vista got announced. Okay, Microsoft was having all kinds of problems with the deployment of Vista in terms of getting people to adopt and actually deploy Vista. So they brought out all these resellers and they brought all these technical people out to Redmond and said, we're going to put you in this conference for 2 or 3 days. We're going to show you all these tools that we have, okay, that you can use to help your customers deploy. All right? But you can't give them to your customers. That's a no-no. For resellers only, can't do anything, you know, customers can't know about it. We want you to do the deployments. We want you to handle all the work, okay, which is good for us because, you know, obviously we're going to make money on it. But at the same time, the users are like, why can't we do this ourselves? We have so many IT departments that are independently operated that can do things on their own. Why can't they do it themselves, right? So then Windows 7 came around and Microsoft said, great idea, let's make this thing public. Let's make a lot of these things that we have that we really give to partners. And maybe they're not exactly what we give to partners, but they're pretty close. And we'll give them to the public. So they can, you know, see how great it is and how awesome it is to be able to deploy massive amounts of Windows 7 machines to their users. Or massive amounts of servers of 2008. You know, easily to do that. And for free. Now, if anybody's in here a reseller, you're familiar with something called the OPK, all right, which is something that was originally, when you bought a machine, do you remember when you bought a machine that was retail? What we call retail, where you would turn it on and you'd see a screen come up and that screen would say, welcome to your new Dell computer, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to sign in? All this other kind of stuff. That was something that was given to OEM vendors. It's called the OPK. Now, today it's called the Express Designer. They've changed it. But those are the tools that they've taken some of that functionality, most of that functionality, and put it into something called the Solution Accelerators. Now, the Solution Accelerators is a whole group of products. I'm not going to do a sales pitch here. I don't work for Microsoft. I don't work for VMware. I don't work for any, you know, I work for myself. But they have a whole suite of products that can really help you if you are deploying Microsoft products. And they're all free and they are supported. Okay? Now, some people don't know about it. They think, oh, God, it's a Microsoft product. They're not going to support it. It's something that is, you know, nothing comes free from Microsoft. Well, I'm not going to argue that point because that's a tough point to argue. But they are free and they are supported. And yes, I did use the word free and supported in the same sentence from a Microsoft offering. I did put an asterisk next to free, though. The reason for that is we have a saying, I don't know if you have a saying in the UK, but we have a saying in the US, it's called free as in free beer. Okay, free as in free beer doesn't necessarily mean free, because you get your beer for free, but then you have to pay for the hangover the next day, and whatever ended you up in jail, if, you know, after that. So it's possible that, you know, you do get free support, but not necessarily if your entire infrastructure goes down, will you get the support you need, if you understand what I'm saying. This is a very interesting picture. This is actually a Grolsch truck that's spilled on the highway. This is the driver of the Grolsch truck. This was in a news story, and his whole truck spilled on the highway, and he came out, and he just started drinking beer. He wasn't going to start picking it up. He was waiting for the people to come help him, the tow truck.
Maybe you know that he's fired.
Yeah. So he just started drinking beer. And they took a picture of him. That's what I mean by free beer, because free beer, yeah, he's getting free beer, but he's also going to get fired. So the MDT solution, the MDT is a Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. Okay? MDT solution can be integrated with WDS. What is WDS? Somebody said they're using it. Windows Deployment Services. Right. Windows Deployment Services is a free role or feature, one of the two, within role. Is it a role? Role or feature within Server 2008, which you can enable, and it allows for the PXE booting, DHCP configuration, and PXE response for deploying images, WIM files. Okay? Now, unless these are custom WIM files, these are blanket, off this DVD, install that WIM. No customizations, no nothing. All right? Just spits it out as Microsoft gave it to you. It can also be integrated with SCCM. I highly recommend, if anyone is running SCCM, to look at MDT to supplement what you're doing with SCCM. I highly recommend it. The new SCCM, I don't know how many people are using SCCM or have even looked at SCCM. SCCM 2012, I was not a big fan of 2010, of Operations Manager in general, but SCCM 2012 is like awesome. It's leaps and bounds over what they've done before, and I'm really impressed by it. Standalone with link deployments. You can do link deployments. So if you have an office, say if you have an office in the Netherlands, one here in the UK, you can do a link deployment where you're actually transferring those files via DFS, distributed files system, over to, or RDFS is called now, over to the Netherlands and deploying from there instead of having to go across the wire to deploy those machines. Task sequence design, anybody who understands how tasks work and task sequences, it's not difficult to understand because all you're doing is executing an operation within a task. I'll show you that. Scripting is supported, PowerShell. Actually, the whole back end of this thing is PowerShell. Everything in Microsoft is making PowerShell now. The whole back end of pretty much everything they're making is PowerShell. Tremendous community support. There really is a lot of good community support. Optional use of SQL. You can use a SQL database to house all of your information on your machines and your users within MDT. The OCT, which is the Office Customization Toolkit, is built in. So you can actually put Office 20X, 2010 now, you can put that into the MDT as an application. And when you open that application in the toolbox, which I'll show you, you can actually click on Run the OCT, which will create an answer file for Office customization. So basically, you're getting your operating system deployed at the same time you're getting your Office deployed as one package. The WSIM file, the answer file integrated. Anybody use the answer files right now, unattended.xmls, things like that? Okay. Yeah, this does the same thing. The Windows SIM actually creates those answer files as a system image manager. SCM GPO packs. Any familiar with the SCM? That's the new security compliance manager. And what that is that creates something called GPO packs, which is really cool because you can basically take an image and you can say, you know, this pack of GPO for security is applied to this image, which goes out to my finance group. This pack of GPOs goes out to this image that goes out to my manufacturing group. Okay? And those are local GPOs. Okay? Deploy to VHD. Everything's going VHD nowadays. If you ask anybody downstairs in that vendor room, they'll tell you everything is going that way. You can actually deploy an operating system to VHD. Windows 8 on the fly to go. Anybody going to BriForum Chicago in 2 months? You're not going to make it to Chicago? Come on down to the States. We'll show you a good time. I'll be talking about Windows 8 to go, Windows on the fly, which is a feature of Windows 8 in Chicago, but it's pretty much the same thing. You're basically taking a VHD and of the operating system. Not only the operating system, but the full applications, everything, created in a VHD. Out-of-box hardware driver injection, being able to take all these drivers that are everywhere, Dell's, HP's, everybody's, and throwing them all in, and be able to inject them into a Windows PE. So when you put that PE and you actually boot it, it'll boot. It won't sit there and go, oh, I'm missing this driver, I can't boot, I'm missing this network driver, I can't find the network, I can't do this, I can't do that. The old PEs always did that, no matter what. You always ran into a problem with drivers. Now, you can do driver injection on the fly. You can do light touch or zero touch, which I talked about. Logging and monitoring. Monitoring is huge. I'll show you that live. You'll be able to actually, you can see your deployments as they're deploying. You can remote desktop into a deployment without having to put any software or anything like that. It's all part of Windows PE now. So you can actually, while it's deploying, remote desktop into it and see it deploying if there are any problems or anything like that. The monitoring also tells you what stage it's at, what task sequence it's executing, what the final results were. So if you're doing 20 machines at one time, you can actually see the status of all those machines. And Dart integration, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Dart. It's part of software assurance, part of the MDOP. I don't know if anybody uses that. Desktop optimization pack that Microsoft makes. The Dart is actually the Diagnostics and Recovery Toolkit. I think that's the word. And what that does is that brings up things like, I don't know if you remember Sys-Ternals used to have something called the ERD. Well, that's now the Dart. Okay? And you can have the Dart right in a deployment. So when that deployment screen comes up, you can have it execute the Dart where you can say, I need to fix this drive, or I need to remote desktop into this to help this user, or I need to do this, or I need to bring up the password locksmith, you know, to get into this machine that's sitting out there, I don't know, doing what in a warehouse somewhere, turned on. Something, you can run the Dart, okay? And a bunch more. So when you talk about Windows deployment tools, you're talking about the answer files. I'm going to fly right through this. The Windows imaging, this is a lot of things we already talked about. This is when you start to get all the tools in one that Microsoft is offering. The weapons of mass deployment, it's called the WAIK. A gentleman named, I have to give credit to Alec DeJong, who created this slide for MMS. I don't know if anybody ever gone to MMS, Microsoft Management Summit. Okay. He had created this for MMS, and I borrowed it from him. But it's an awesome slide. The weapons of mass deployment, the WAIK or the Windows Embedded. You can actually do Windows Embedded as part of the MDT 2012. You can do POS. So you can deploy to POS machines now. Okay? And you can deploy to UEFI, which is the format, the new machine format for USB. The WAIK is the wake is everything that encompasses Windows PE. It's the automated installation kit. It's everything PE. It includes the image manager, the Windows system image manager, includes everything. It's like a 3 gig download. It's huge. Excuse me. When you're dealing with all those, that's what I was talking about, ImageX, SIM, SysPrep, DISM, Windows PE, so on and so forth. Then you have the deployment toolkit, which sits right in the middle. And then you have the third parties, which are right on top, which can be like Setup Commander, Update Commander. These are all third-party apps that work with the toolkit. The map is the Microsoft application, or Microsoft, is it the application planning toolkit? I can't remember. But it has, there's a map and there's another one. One is the application toolkit, and another one is the deployment, or the deployment planning toolkit. I can't remember them all. And then on the end, you have, all those can do light touch. But when you get over to System Center, that's when you can actually do zero touch, a full zero touch, where the user doesn't touch the machine at all. Okay? Zero touch is possible with the MDT, but it's not really supported. You really have to have SCCM to do a full zero touch. All right, now all the good stuff. So the first thing I want to show you, and I hope this comes up on the screen. Maybe not. Let's see. I switched over to virtual machine, so I'm hoping that it doesn't. It actually picks it up and shows it. Ah, there it is. This is a Windows 2008 R2 server that has the tools installed, all the different solution tools. And you'll notice on the left it has a deployment workbench, and that deployment workbench is installed when you install the MDT. All right. The first thing you have to do is install something called the WAIK. All right. In order for MDT to function, you have to have the AIK installed. So you'd go through and install that first, and then you install the deployment toolkit. The reason for that is because the deployment toolkit cannot function without Windows PE. It has to be there. So basically what I've done is you can run the deployment toolkit on a little machine like this. It's on a virtual machine. Okay, it's not that big of a beast. It doesn't do that much. Okay, it does a lot of, talking over the network. And it needs a bunch of disk space for operating system files for the entire OS. But it doesn't do a lot else. Okay. Now what you can do is you can run this along with a WDS server. All right. So what this does is this takes MDT and makes it into a more automated PXE booted solution, where the WDS would PXE boot the machine, and then MDT takes over and puts down the custom image. Okay? You understand how that works? Cool. All right. So this is my deployment workbench for the MDT. Now, some of the things you're going to notice about this is I've created two separate deployment points, one Windows 7 deploy and a 2008 R2, actually three of them. The third one, the deployment share, was a test I was doing. But you have a Windows 7 deploy and a server 2008 R2 deploy. I always separate my desktop from my servers on my deployments. Some people don't. Some people throw them all in one. You can, because of the fact that you have several options within MDT to separate them out when you start doing deployments. There are folders, and there are specific, they call them selection profiles and things like that. You can throw them all into one if you like. All right? But I always separate them because I don't like to have too much stuff in one place. As you'll notice in here, on the Windows 7 deployment, you can see that it has applications, operating systems, out-of-box drivers, packages, task sequences, advanced, and monitoring. Now, obviously, the biggest thing we're going to be dealing with here is something called task sequences. I'll step through this real quick. Is the first thing you would do is you would import operating systems. You basically right-click and you say Import Operating System, and it'll come back and ask you, what operating system do you want to import? So you take a DVD of Windows 7, you mount it, either virtually or physically, and you run this wizard, and it sucks all the files in and puts it in your deployment share. No questions asked, just does it. You'll notice on the bottom here there is an option for WDS images. So we'll actually take your images that are on your WDS server, your existing ones, bring them into MDT so you can customize them, and then push them back out. The thing about WDS is very limited in what you can do to an image unless you do it manually. Unless you use the command line tool, the DISM or the ImageX to add to an image, to update an image, to do things like that. So it's very limited in what it can do. MDT actually takes a lot of that and puts it into a graphical form and allows you to do more. Now, the biggest thing that I have to keep reiterating about this is that this is all free. All right? Microsoft doesn't tie you to anything with this. All of this stuff is free. And this is a complete solution. What we do is after adding the operating systems, we can add out-of-box drivers. You see I have my Dell, my HP, my VMware, and inside of my VMware drivers I have my mouse, my VMX nets, my SCSI adapters, so on and so forth. These are the drivers that will be injected into the Windows PE. So when a machine is booted with that Windows PE image, okay, it'll look at these, it'll look at the hardware, look for what they call the PCI vendor ID, that real long vendor ID. It'll look at that and it'll say, oh, I need a VMware whatever, a network driver. And then a Windows PE will say, oh, I've got that. It's in my driver cache. Pull it out, you're good to go. When you're dealing with task sequences, this is an example of a task sequence. As you can see, a task sequence is basically just a series of steps. Now, any Windows installation, if you take it right off of the DVD, it's doing the exact same basic steps. They've just added a whole bunch of optional steps that you can do inside of here and the SCCM, okay? But everything, initialize, validation, state capture, pre-install, install, post-install, and state restore, those are all part of a off-the-disk install from Microsoft. Now the nice thing about the MDT2 is that you can do more than just do bare metal install. You can do a refresh, right? Or you can do an upgrade. You know, you can use something called the user state migration tool, which is also part of the MDT, that allows you to have the user actually back up their files, backs them up to a location that you or the user specifies. User comes back, has their files backed up. Windows is automatically upgraded from XP to Windows 7 or Windows 8 or whatever it's going to be. It gets upgraded. Then the task sequence comes back and says, oh, we've got to put all your users, your settings back, your settings and files back. So it takes them all and puts them all back. We had deployed this at one client, and it had some bumps in the road, but overall, the users loved it because of the fact that they didn't lose a lot of the things that they wanted. To give you an idea of a task sequence, you know, all these recover from domain, a lot of these names and things like that, you have to actually work with this a little bit to understand what they're doing. But this will automatically go through and join a domain, the machine to the domain. It'll automatically add the user to the computer description to the domain. It'll do pretty much everything that you want it to do. If you can't do it within here, you can create a script to do it, or if somebody else has already created a script to do it. And if somebody else has already created a script to do it, you basically sit here and go add, general, run PowerShell script, or run command line. And you can run whatever you like. I have I do I have it here? Well, I have a simple one that creates a temp directory. It runs command line and just creates ctemp. I have another one that copies all the sysinternal files to the C drive. And it's just running that's actually running xcopy. So if you're getting the idea of this, I mean, it pretty much can do a lot with this. Not only just deploy an operating system, but a lot more. You'll notice down here you can actually do even GPO settings. Okay? You can go so far as into here and you can say, you know, you can do things like restart the computer, but you can actually install an application, install updates. You can enable BitLocker. That's part of the standard task sequences to enable BitLocker. Turn that on and turn it off. You can apply or add roles for servers. You can, you know, DHCP, DNS, stuff like that. You can do that on the fly. The whole point of this is that from the time that you execute this task sequence until the time it is done, it will have everything that you want it to be inside of that image. Your applications, your registry settings, your scripts, your whatever. And it's all laid down on that machine in one pass. Inside of here, this is where I said it actually runs the WinSim. So for the operating system, Windows 7 Enterprise, I can say edit the unattended. It'll start up the WinSim, so I can actually create an unattended for those of you that are familiar with that. And you can go through and you can change the UBI, which is the user-based I don't remember what UBI stands for. What is that? Out-of-box experience? Yeah. But you can go in and change all that. That can, basically do everything that you want, that the internals of the operating system. Setting the SNMP, community string. Doing stuff like that. Instead of doing a regedit to do that, which you could do, okay, as a script, you can go into the UBI and you can tell it to do that. Yes?
Same on a custom image or
I'm sorry?
can you do the same on a custom image to the image on the DVD?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The thing I don't like about this though, and anybody who's worked with it, it's very complicated to understand. Especially when you want to find a specific something to enable or disable, you have to do a little bit of hunting. They have a great help file, but you have to use the help file to find out what you want to change. I just go out and I download a PowerShell script or something that somebody else has already created to do it instead of modifying this. So. All right. I am going to start a deployment.
I've got one question.
Yep.
Can you automate the machine name? If you were deploying, say, 50 machines,
Mm-hmm.
can you automate the machine name? And can you assign IP addresses?
Windows PE, now this is going to change with Windows PE 4.0 is coming out with Windows 8. Okay, and they're changing the name of the AIK they're changing the WAIK, the Automated Installation Kit. It's no longer going to be the AIK, but it's going to include Windows PE 4.0. Windows PE 4.0 will have a better handling of assigning a static IP address. Right now in Windows, because that's all Windows PE, that's really not anything with like the MDT or anything, that's all Windows PE. Right now you have to use DHCP or from the Pixie if you're using WDS to do that. You can create a static, but I've never had really good luck with doing the statics. That's supposed to change.
Machine names. Can you automate you want to sequence machine names?
Yep.
Can you do that? Is it possible to do?
Yes, sir. Yep.
You pull machine names out of the BIOS.
I'm sorry?
You pull machine names out of the BIOS.
Yes. If you can make a WMI call, you can pull it. Because one of the features of the task sequence, okay, if I was to go in here and modify this task sequence, and I went in here and I said, give me an add. Now. And I go general and I say set task sequence variable. In here, I can say query WMI. So I can actually go out and query. One of the cool things that they did with 2012 is they added the ability to determine whether the machine was on battery or not. Because a lot of deployments would fail because the batteries would die. Okay, for people that are out, remote users and things. So they've actually, created that is battery kind of option. You can go out and query anything you can pull out of the BIOS, out of WMI, you can incorporate into your scripts, into your task sequences. You can even pull registry settings, as you can see. File properties, I can determine whether a file is, what permissions are on a file, and that should determine whether or not this sequence is going to run. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say File, New Virtual Machine, do a custom. This is Workstation 8. I'm going to say I want to install later. And it's Windows 7 x64. And I'm going to call it Win7 Demo 10. And that's fine, that's fine. I have to use that since I'm running on my laptop. And I'm going to make a 20 gig drive. Okay, so basically in Windows and VMware Workstation, I just created a blank virtual machine. That's all I did. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell this blank virtual machine to boot to my ISO file, which I created in the MDT. It's called a Light Touch PE X64, and I always append a W7 or a SVR for server after it so I know which one it is, because they tend to build the same name. So all I'm telling it to do is boot from this image. Now, does it have to be a CD or DVD? No. Can it be a USB stick? Yes. Can it be Pixie? Yes. Can it be some other form of deployment that nobody's thought of? Yes, probably. So, and when this boots up, it goes out and it looks like it's loading Windows, but it's actually loading the PE environment. Right now it's going through and it's looking at drivers. It's looking at the PCI vendor codes and saying, do I need a driver for the NIC? Do I need a driver for the hard drive? What do I need? And it's trying to pull all that information. Yeah? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. They're loaded into the WinPE image. Yep. The actual image, the WinPE is actually merged with all of your applications, your out-of-box drivers, any packages, anything like that, and it takes the WinPE and it merges it into that and makes one new ISO, a brand new ISO. One more time. I apologize. Is that actually using in the background ImageX? Yes. Yeah. Yep. So what I've done is there are so many options inside of MDT. I can tell you to turn off this screen. You can turn off all screens. You can turn them on, turn them off, do whatever you want to do. You can customize this. You can put your own welcome. You can put your company logo. You can do all this kind of stuff. Because all this stuff is XML. That's all it is. It's XML and HTA files. So in here, I've actually added the capability to run the Dart tools. All right? And you can run the Windows Recovery Wizard. Or you can just exit to a command prompt. Or you can actually run the deployment. Now, you'll notice configure with static IP address, like you had asked. Doesn't quite work, though. It works, but I haven't had that much luck with it. I haven't known too many people that have. But so what we would do is if you wanted to run the Dart, you basically go down here and say, oh, tell a user, you can push this out to a user's machine. They've got a problem. You say, okay, just run the Dart. Okay, well, with the Dart, I can go out there and I can do a disk wipe. I can do a file restore, crash analyzer, everything that the ERD used to be able to do. You can do it remotely now. And it's all integrated into the image. And now, if you realize what's happening here, this is no longer the Windows PE image. Windows PE image is set in the background. It's actually reading all of this information from my deployment share that's on my server. It's saying, show all these options. You know, and I click next, and then the XML file is saying, okay, click next to do this. Go do this. Execute this task sequence. So I'm going to go out and say, run it. Run the deployment wizard. It's going to come up and it's going to ask me, what task sequence do you want to deploy? I can have this automated where the user never even sees this. Automatically sent to this MAC address. If this group of machines that have this IP address range, okay, that are DHCP'd, or they have this MAC address range, or they have this machine name range, automatically deploy this task sequence to it. Nothing else. That can all be done in the MDT. So I'll pick the Windows 7 demo build, and it's going to come up and ask me, do I want to join a domain? What's my machine name? What do I want to do with it? Again, this can all be automated. Go ahead and pick your apps. I've got a couple out there, Acrobat Reader, Notepad, Office 2010, and then I've actually got some registry tweaks. So I just go out and say, well, I want, for this machine, I'm going to have Reader, and I'm going to have Notepad. And it's going to ask me if I want to enable BitLocker. The reason why it asked me that is because it knew, it looked at my WMI, and it knew I had a TPM chip in it. If it has TPM, BitLocker automatically says, do you want to enable BitLocker? Yes or no? Now, it's going to go through and it's going to do its thing. And I don't even have to touch this machine now until it's all done. It's going to reboot on its own. It's going to log all of it. It's going to do everything. If I switch back to my server and I go down here to monitoring, I can actually see this one running. And it's going to tell me what phase it's in, what the elapsed time is, how many steps in the task sequence. And you'll notice I did one before, and that one actually took 10 minutes and 12 seconds to fully deploy. But that, again, it's on a lab machine. It's all in one, you know, this isn't a real world thing. It's more like a 20 to 30 minute deal in the real world. When you actually have this highlighted, okay, once it actually starts up, there we go. You can actually look at it. You have a remote desktop, and you have a Dart remote control. Now, if I didn't have Dart integrated in the MDT, you wouldn't see this button, but you would have a remote desktop. So now I can go out and view that deployment actually taking place. So if you got a user that's 1,000 miles away, you can actually see the deployment taking place on their machine. You'll notice that under the task sequence, you can even limit it, you know, what type of operating systems the task sequence can run on. So, which is really confusing because, I mean, I'm not operating system, client platform, which means that it'll go out and read the processor. If it's an x64 processor, it'll only allow it this, you know, whatever task sequence to run on an x64 processor. It won't allow, you know, it to run on something that can't do x64. You have that same option because it just does a WMI query and says, are you an x64 processor? It does the same thing with applications. You go in and define an application. See, I have my standard apps, my Adobe Reader. If I go into the properties of that, you basically can tell it can only run on these platforms, and this is the quiet install command that you're running to install it. You can do application bundles, which means that you have a series of applications that have to be installed together. So you have .NET that has to be installed with something else. That's considered a bundle. If you have any customized apps, things like that. How many have ever used a website app deploy? Have you ever heard of that? Well, now it's what, IT Ninja or something dumb like that? I don't know what it's called, but Case. The guys at Case renamed it to IT Ninja or something. Anyways, they have the best listing of silent automated install scripts. Any product you ever want out there, you go out and look there and it'll tell you how to do it, install it silently. It's pretty cool.
One thing, if you're using configuration manager, where do what's in the system center configuration manager in the MDT?
Between the, I'm sorry, which one?
Yeah, which components are in the system center configuration manager? And
Oh, okay.
can you see,
Right.
Yeah.
The SCCM actually adds a bunch of functionality. It's kind of like getting a, I don't know what you have over here, a Peugeot compared to a BMW or a Aston Martin, if you will. The all-encompassing everything from Windows updates to, you know, the 100 different things you can do with SCCM, where MDT does 10.
But you have to have MDT? Or
Well,
everything in system center?
No. Actually, you really, MDT will satisfy everything for an automated deployment without a doubt, including applications and all that. If you're a larger organization, I highly recommend looking at SCCM because that handles, it used to be the old SMS. I don't know if you're familiar with SMS. The SMS is the ability to push from multiple points and replicate packages and things like that. MDT does that, but it's very rudimentary in how it does it. It's very basic in how it does it. You have to manually do some copies and things like that, okay, where SCCM automates all that.
Yeah. But do you install both products?
No, you don't need, you can, if you own SCCM, yes. But MDT can survive on its own. It can run on its own.
But can SSM on its own? Or
Yes, yep. It sure can, because the SCCM has something called the OSD, which is the operating system deployment package or module, which is basically MDT up a notch. Okay? Yes, sir.
Where we pull the WDS images in?
One more time.
Where you've got the option to pull a WDS image into MDP. Once you've got it there, can you change the structure of that?
Once you've got it there, once you've got a WDS image in here, or a predefined custom WIM, once you've got it in here, it basically just gets added as an operating system. Okay? So you would right-click, do an import, bring it in, and then inside of a task sequence, you can tell it, use this custom WIM, but then add these applications, add these registry edits, add this, that, and the other thing. Do you see the flexibility with that as compared to WDS? The ability to take that custom WIM and not have to rebuild the WIM every time?
So things like Windows updates, you apply updates to
Mm-hmm.
up to date, and then say, can you actually export it back out? So
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Because it never touches the WIM. It's just it's pulling everything from the deployment. It's never actually changing the WIM itself. It's creating
you can't actually inject the Windows updates into the WIM image.
Right. It's deploying the image as it is, and then it's bringing the applications and things in afterwards. Right. Right. Whatever you put in there from a WIM standpoint doesn't get modified. Okay? I'm just going to check the deployment on this machine here. So right now it's at, let's see if I refresh here, make sure. 50% complete, 6 minutes in, step 48. And this is what it's doing. It's still going through the whole installing Windows thing that it does. We've got about 10 minutes left. Does anybody have any other questions or anything they want to see? I'd be happy to show it to you.
Looking at this looks like it's very similar to what we used to do 2003 years ago, which was the ADS.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Is that effectively what it is?
Very
Did that
similar.
ever exist for 2008?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they actually, do you remember something called a BDD? You ever heard of that? The Business Deployment, what was it called? BDD, it was Business Deployment something. But that was the original MDT, the actual Deployment Toolkit, when Vista first came out. And they wouldn't give it to the public. They'd only give it to resellers. So then they came out with the MDT, and it's very, very similar to and what you're talking about too. It's very similar. Now, everything in the background of this is using the tools that you're familiar with. The ImageX, the DISM, the Windows SIM, those are all in the background of this. They're still actually used. So this will go through and do its restart and then install my applications and all that kind of stuff. It's just going back and reconnecting to a share. That's all it's doing.
Mike, SCCM, is that free?
No. Now, it depends. I should say, I clarify that.
Yeah.
If you're part of an EA, enterprise agreement, if you have something called the Enterprise CAL, which I don't know if you do or not, but if you have an Enterprise CAL, SCCM is basically free because they no longer charge for the server. They used to charge for the server when it was 2010. Now with 2012, they no longer charge for a server. So yes, if you have an Enterprise CAL, which includes the SCCM client, then it is free for you under an EA. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. To tell you the truth, I mean, they, when they came out with 2012, they changed all the packages in terms of how they sell SCOM, the whole operations manager, virtual machine manager, everything. They changed it all, how they sell it. And if you own the CALs, you basically can run it now. So the same goes with WSUS. I don't know if anybody runs WSUS for their update services. That's another thing that SCCM gives you, that MDT can, is the update services, which automatically deploys updates from Microsoft, all the Windows updates. But if anybody runs WSUS, WSUS is now free also. So, I'm sorry? It was free, but with System Center 2010, in order to integrate it with SCCM, you had to pay for SCCM. Yeah. Now you don't have to. You don't have to pay for that integration anymore. So it's going in, you can see it's installing my Acrobat Reader. Now it's installing Notepad. Now it's doing something called Restore User State, which basically goes out and says, collect all the information of where I'm at, and then I'm going to do a reboot and come back, and then do what else I need to do. Look at that. Ready to use. It'll actually tell you if there are any, you click on here, it'll actually tell you if there are any warnings or errors in your deployment. If I click on this now, I have it set to do a restart, so you always want to reboot after you do an install. It'll come back up. This will actually show as completed. Right there, 100%, and it took 10 minutes and 14 seconds. I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge that I have been able to deploy up to 50 machines at one time from one MDT server that's a virtual server. Okay, so I've had 50 machines being deployed at one time without a problem. Because what they do is they just go out and read the deployment share. That's all they do is they go out into the deployment share, they read it, they say, this is my task sequence, this is my thing. The operating system, the OS WIM install is probably the biggest, heaviest hitter of the network. But everything else falls right into place. And I was doing servers and desktops at the same time. VDI inside of VMware, it's a piece of cake with this thing. I can knock out 20 or 30 machines, no problem, you know, and they're customized to every one. I've got developers in Dubai. My developers in Dubai have a totally separate task sequence than my financial people who are in the States. Okay, so my financial people get one task sequence that just gives them their accounting apps, nothing else. The ones in Dubai get Visual Studio, local SQL install, all that kind of stuff. They get theirs. If they ever have a problem with their machine, all they need to do is they go to a website that's built from the MDT, which you can do. It's an add-on, okay? That doesn't cost anything, but it's an add-on that was created for it. They can go out and they can request their own build. So it's a self-service portal also. So we tell our users, go back out, self-service portal, you sign in, you can only see your task sequence. You say, this is my machine name, execute my task sequence, it'll re-image your machine. And they don't have to do anything. Then you run into problems with, oh, I want my wallpaper back, I want my everything, you know, well, that's another story. Does anybody have any other questions? You want to see anything? Anything right off the bat? Yes?
Yeah, if you could deploy a full ZApp file to be automated, that'd be great to see that.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah.
User state.
I have to apologize. There's a fan that blows right now. I can't hear that well.
Yeah, that user state, restoring the user
State.
What's that actually restoring? Is it like profile information or?
You select. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be. Sorry. You actually select what you'd like in terms of files, okay, IE settings, favorites, things like that. It's all part of, you ever done the user transfer wizard inside of Windows 7? It's basically doing the same thing. You can transfer all the personal settings, all that kind of stuff. And you tell it, either dictate what the user can do, or you let the user select, I want my files from my C drive, I want my favorites, I want this, and that's it.
But it's not going to provide you a solution for moving, because you mentioned earlier about moving from XP to Windows 7. It's not going to do any profile management for you, is it?
Oh, no, 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 no. No. Yeah, no, it's not going to do the it's going to lay those files back down, okay? Just like the wizard does from XP to 7. It'll lay those files back down, so you will get them back in their favorites and things like that, but it doesn't do complete profile management. No. No. That's a whole separate animal. One thing I do want to mention before everybody goes, if you ever get the opportunity to see a trainer, that you're ever interested in deployment tools, this person, this is a training set by a company called Train Signal. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them. They do all kinds of training in the U.S. They're huge in the U.S. But there's a person named Rhonda Layfield who is the MVP for the MDT. MVP for the MDT. She is the MVP for Microsoft on this, and she actually developed this training. It's 15 hours of training on how to use the WDS, SCCM with MDT, the whole bit. WAIK, user state migration tool, everything. All in this DVD set right here. So if you have the opportunity, train Signal, and you're looking for Windows 7 deployment. So good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.